nestled on a quiet street in a pleasant Long Island suburb. The large Dutch colonial house at 112 Ocean Avenue appeared to be the perfect family home, with its charming gambrel roof and distinctive quarter-moon, windows that resembled eyes. It held the promise of a peaceful life. However, behind its welcoming facade, this house concealed a history of unimaginable horror, a darkness that would soon seep into the lives of its new owners and create America's most infamous ghost story. The events that unfolded within its walls would blur the lines between fact and fiction, becoming a legend of pure terror. The dark legacy of the Amityville house began on the cold, grim night of November 13, 1974, while the town slept peacefully. A horrific event took place inside the home, a tragedy so brutal and shocking it would forever stain the property with an aura of violence and despair. The DeFeo family, who had lived in the house for years, became the victims of a crime that defied all reason. In the dead of night, 6 members of the family were systematically and mercilessly ended in their own beds, marking the beginning of the house's sinister reputation. The victims of the massacre were Ronald DeFeo Jr., his wife Louise, and 4 of their 5 children, Dawn, Allison, Mark, and John Matthew. They were discovered the following day in a scene of absolute horror. The crime was not just a tragedy, but a profound mystery. The nature of the violence seemed personal and methodical, leaving the community in a state of shock and fear. The home that was once filled with the sounds of a large, vibrant family was now a silent, grim monument to a night of unexplained bloodshed, setting the stage for even stranger events to come. One of the most chilling and inexplicable details of the crime scene was the position of the bodies. Every single victim was found lying face down in their bed, in a seemingly calm and sleeping posture. There were no signs of a struggle, no defensive wounds, and no indication that any of them had been roused from their sleep by the loud blasts of the high-powered rifle used in the attack. This bizarre detail puzzled investigators and added a deeply unsettling layer to the already horrific crime, suggesting a quiet, almost supernatural element to the night's events. The mystery deepened when investigators considered the weapon used, a .35 caliber Marlin rifle. Such a firearm produces an incredibly loud noise. Yet none of the neighbors reported hearing any gunshots. They only recalled the frantic barking of the family dog, Shaggy, around the time of the murders. Furthermore, there was no evidence that any of the victims had been drugged or sedated. The question of how 6 people could be shot in their sleep without a single one waking up or alerting the others remains one of the most haunting and debated aspects of the Amityville case. The sole perpetrator of this horrific act was revealed to be the eldest son, Ronald DeFeo Jr., who was 23 years old at the time. Initially, he ran to a nearby bar, claiming his family had been killed by a mob hitman. However, inconsistencies in his story quickly unraveled his alibi, and the focus of the investigation turned squarely on him. Under questioning, his story collapsed, and he eventually confessed to the police that he was the one who had taken the lives of his entire family, one by one, in the dead of night. When asked for a motive, Ronald DeFeo Jr.'s explanation was anything but ordinary. His defense during the trial centered on the claim that he hadn't acted alone. He insisted that he heard sinister voices in the house, disembodied whispers that grew stronger over time, urging him to commit the terrible deed. He claimed that these dark entities had possessed him, compelling him to eliminate his family. This defense, a plea of insanity driven by demonic influence, was the first time the house itself was implicated as a source of evil, a narrative that would soon grow exponentially. Despite his claims of demonic possession and hearing voices, the court did not accept his insanity plea. The prosecution argued that he was a troubled young man, motivated by a desire to collect his family's substantial life insurance policies. In the end, Ronald DeFeo Jr. was found guilty of 6 counts of second-degree murder and was sentenced to 6 consecutive sentences of 25 years to life in prison. While the legal case was closed, the story of the house on Ocean Avenue and the evil it might contain was only just beginning. Just over a year later, in December of 1975, the house was put up for sale at a significantly reduced price. The Lutz family, George, Kathy, and her 3 children from a previous marriage, Daniel, Christopher, and Melissa, saw it as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. They were aware of the home's grim history, but the beautiful property and the low price of $80,000 were too good to pass up. They believed they could fill the house with new, happy memories, cleansing it of its tragic past and turning it into their dream home. George and Kathy Lutz were optimistic. They saw the grand house not as a site of a massacre, but as a place to build their future. They imagined their children playing in the spacious yard and celebrating holidays in the large living room. They felt that the love of their new family would be strong enough to overcome any lingering sadness within the walls. They were not superstitious people and dismissed the town's whispers about the house being haunted. Unfortunately, their optimism would be short-lived, as their dream home would soon become their worst nightmare. Shortly after moving in, the Lutz family asked a priest, Father Mancuso, to come and bless the house, hoping to dispel any negative energy. As the priest began his blessing in one of the upstairs rooms, he was overcome by a sudden, intense chill. He then heard a powerful, demonic male voice thunderously command, "Get out." Shaken, the priest left immediately, later developing a high fever and painful blisters on his hands. He tried to warn the Lutz family by phone, but every call was plagued by static and would mysteriously drop. The strange occurrences began to escalate almost immediately. One of the first and most bizarre phenomena was the appearance of swarms of houseflies. Despite the freezing December weather, hundreds of flies would congregate in a specific upstairs sewing room, a room that had been the bedroom of Ronald DeFeo. No matter how many times the Lutzes swatted them or sealed the windows, the flies would always return in massive numbers, a disgusting and unnatural infestation that defied any logical explanation and seemed to be a harbinger of worse things to come. A pervasive, unnatural cold also settled into the house. Certain areas, even with the heating system running at full blast, would become inexplicably icy. The family would be walking down a hallway and suddenly step into a pocket of air so cold it would take their breath away. George became obsessed with the fireplace, keeping a roaring fire going day and night. Yet, it did little to combat the bone-deep chill that seemed to emanate from the very structure of the house itself. A coldness that felt more spiritual than physical. Phantom smells began to drift through the hallways and rooms, appearing and vanishing without a source. Sometimes, the family would smell a cloyingly sweet perfume, while at other times, a foul, nauseating odor similar to waste or decay would fill the air. These inexplicable scents would often be localized to one small area and would disappear as quickly as they came. This assault on their senses added to the growing feeling that they were not alone in the house, that an unseen presence was making itself known in subtle, disturbing ways. As the days went on, the house grew louder and more active, especially at night. The family would be startled by the sound of the front door slamming shut in the middle of the night, only to find it securely locked. They heard strange noises from the empty floors above them, like furniture being dragged across the floorboards. Disembodied footsteps would be heard climbing the stairs, and faint, murmuring voices seemed to whisper just out of earshot, creating an atmosphere of constant tension and fear. The most frightening changes began to occur within George Lutz himself, a once easygoing and cheerful man. He became sullen, withdrawn, and prone to fits of rage. He stopped caring about his personal hygiene and spent his days listlessly on the couch. His physical appearance even began to change, and family members noted with growing horror that he was starting to bear a startling resemblance to Ronald DeFeo Jr., the very man who had committed the murders in that house a year earlier. George's disturbing behavior included new, obsessive habits. He developed a fixation with constantly chopping wood for the fireplace, even though they had more than enough. More unnervingly, he started waking up abruptly every single morning at 3:15 a.m., a time that was later speculated to be the exact time of the DeFeo murders. He would feel an overwhelming urge to go check on his family and the boathouse, feeling a sense of dread he couldn't explain, as if reliving a dark ritual night after night. Kathy Lutz was also a target of the house's malevolent energy. She began to have terrifyingly vivid nightmares about the murders, seeing the events unfold from the perspective of the killer. She often felt a cold, unseen presence touching her in her sleep. In the mornings, she would discover red welts and bruises on her body that she could not explain. It felt as though the house was physically attacking her, leaving its invisible marks on her skin as a warning of its power. Perhaps the most iconic and terrifying aspect of the Amityville haunting involved the youngest child, 5-year-old Melissa. Nicknamed Missy, she began talking about a new, imaginary friend named Jodie. While imaginary friends are common for children, Missy's descriptions of Jodie were deeply unsettling. She claimed Jodie was not a person, but a strange creature that could change shape and was often very angry. Jodie told Missy things about the house and the family that a 5-year-old could not possibly know. Missy described Jodie as a large, pig-like creature with glowing red eyes. This friend warned Missy that she and her family would live in the house forever and never leave. The idea of her innocent daughter communicating with such a malevolent-sounding entity terrified Kathy and George. Jodie's presence seemed to be a direct link to the dark forces occupying their home, a demon-like figure that was now forming a bond with their youngest child, a thought that chilled them to the bone. The terror surrounding Jodie became horrifyingly real one night. As George stood in the living room, he looked up at Missy's bedroom window from the outside and was frozen with fear. Staring back at him from the darkness of the room were 2 glowing red eyes, just as his daughter had described. They hovered in the window for a moment before disappearing. It was no longer a child's fantasy. It was a physical manifestation of the evil that had taken root in their home. Rushing outside to confront whatever he had seen, George found nothing. But the next morning, he discovered a set of strange tracks in the fresh snow leading up to the house. The prints were not human, nor did they belong to any known animal in the area. They were cloven, like the hoof prints of a massive pig or goat. The tracks led directly to the house, and then simply stopped, as if the creature had vanished into thin air, confirming the family's darkest fears. While exploring the basement, George stumbled upon a small, hidden room that was not included in the blueprints of the house. The walls of this tiny, windowless space were painted a deep blood red. The family's dog, Harry, who was normally brave, showed an intense and uncharacteristic fear of the basement, refusing to go near the stairs and cowering whenever the door was opened. The Red Room, as they called it, emanated a feeling of profound dread, a cold spot of concentrated evil. George felt a strange pull toward the Red Room, a mixture of fascination and revulsion. He came to believe that this secret chamber was the heart of the house's evil, possibly a gateway or portal to something demonic. The purpose of the room remained a mystery, but its oppressive atmosphere and the dog's terrified reaction convinced the family that it was a place of significant power, a focal point for the malevolent energy that was slowly tearing their lives apart. As their final days in the house approached, the paranormal activity intensified dramatically. The walls in the hallway began to exude a strange, greenish-black slime that would drip from the ceiling. Crucifixes that Kathy hung on the walls would inexplicably turn upside down on their own. The air grew thick with a sense of oppression, and the family felt as though they were constantly being watched by a hateful, invisible entity that was growing stronger and more aggressive with each passing day. The breaking point came on their 28th and final night in the house. The paranormal phenomena reached a terrifying crescendo in a full-scale assault. Loud, banging noises, which George described as sounding like a marching band, echoed through the home. Furniture was thrown across rooms by an unseen force, and the very foundation of the house seemed to groan and shift around them. The family was trapped in a chaotic whirlwind of supernatural violence, fearing for their lives. During this final night of terror, George claimed to have been awakened by a deafening crash and saw a powerful, levitating, hooded figure with glowing eyes standing in the hallway. It was an entity of pure darkness and malice. This final, horrifying vision was the last straw. Convinced that the house was actively trying to harm or even possess them, George and Kathy knew they could not spend another minute there. Their dream had fully transformed into a living hell. In the middle of that chaotic night, The Lutz family fled from the house in absolute terror. They left with only the clothes on their backs, abandoning all of their possessions, furniture, clothes, and personal items. They never returned to collect their things, and they never looked back. Their 28-day ordeal at 112 Ocean Avenue was over. But the story of what happened to them was just about to explode into a national phenomenon. The Lutz's harrowing story quickly captured public attention and attracted the interest of famed paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. The Warrens, known for their work on other high-profile hauntings, conducted a séance at the house in March of 1976. They brought a team of researchers and a television crew to document their investigation into what they believed was a case of profound demonic infestation. Their findings would only add more fuel to the growing legend of Amityville. Lorraine Warren, a gifted clairvoyant, described the Amityville house as one of the most terrifying locations she had ever investigated. She claimed to have felt a demonic, inhuman presence that was far more sinister than a typical human ghost. She felt the lingering pain and trauma of the DeFeo family, describing the house as a place where the veil between worlds was dangerously thin. The Warrens concluded that the property was infested by a powerful, malevolent entity drawn to the tragedy that occurred there. During the Warrens' investigation, a photographer set up an automatic camera with infrared film on the second-floor landing. The camera was programmed to take pictures throughout the night. One of these photos, when developed, became one of the most famous pieces of paranormal evidence ever captured. It appeared to show the ghostly figure of a small boy with glowing white eyes peeking out from a doorway. Many believe this is the spirit of John Matthew DeFeo, the youngest of the murdered children. As the story grew into a best-selling book and a blockbuster movie, so did the skepticism. Many people began to question the authenticity of the Lutz family's claims, suggesting that the entire ordeal was an elaborate hoax designed for financial gain. Critics pointed out inconsistencies in their story and the lack of concrete physical evidence. The Amityville horror became a subject of intense debate, pitting believers in the supernatural against those who saw it as nothing more than a well-marketed ghost story. The hoax theory gained significant credibility when William Weber, the defense attorney for Ronald DeFeo Jr., came forward with a shocking claim. He stated that he, along with the Lutzes, had fabricated the entire haunting story over many bottles of wine. Weber alleged that they took the known facts of the DeFeo murders and embellished them with supernatural elements to create a sensational story that they could sell to publishers and filmmakers. This accusation cast a permanent shadow of doubt over the Lutz's account, further damaging the credibility of the haunting claims. Were the experiences of the families who lived in the house after the Lutzes fled. The Cromarty family, who bought the house in 1977 and lived there for a decade, publicly stated that they never experienced a single paranormal event. They reported their time in the house was perfectly peaceful. Subsequent owners have all said the same thing, leading many to conclude that the evil either left with the Lutzes or was never there to begin with. Regardless of its authenticity, the Amityville horror has left an indelible mark on American popular culture. The story has spawned a massive media franchise, including numerous books, documentaries, and over a dozen films. The house, with its iconic eye-like windows, has become a universal symbol for the haunted house archetype. The tale taps into a primal fear, the idea that the one place we are supposed to feel safest, our own home, can be invaded by an evil force we cannot understand or fight. To this day, the truth of what really happened during those 28 days in the winter of 1975 remains a mystery. Was the Lutz family genuinely tormented by a demonic force, unleashed by a horrific tragedy? Were they the victims of a clever and highly profitable hoax? Or was their experience a psychological breakdown, fueled by the knowledge of the horrors that had occurred in their home? The legend of Amityville endures because it resides in this unsettling gray area, a terrifying story that leaves us to wonder about the darkness that can linger in ordinary places.